So today I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a dose of what our youth group has been doing with the gospel according to superheroes. And sorry to those who are here who are going to get a little bit of a repeat of what we've done already. But a few weeks ago, we talked about the movie Captain America: Civil War. Specifically, we talked about Black Panther, T'Challa, in that. And T'Challa, in the story, his father is killed. And he believes it's Captain America's friend, Bucky, who's done this. So throughout the film, T'Challa is chasing after Bucky with a thirst for righteous vengeance for his killing his father. And spoiler alert, towards the end of the movie, something different happens. T'Challa finds out it wasn't Bucky at all, that he was set up. And he finds the real person responsible, Nemo. Now he encounters Nemo. He's got his claws out, ready to hurt him, to kill him even. And he listens to Nemo's story. And it turns out that Nemo has been doing all the bad stuff in the movie, has been manipulating all the heroes because he's mad at the Avengers. They had a big fight, albeit saving the world from a villain who was trying to destroy it. And in the middle of that fight, Nemo's family was killed. It's in that moment that T'Challa says, "Vengeance has consumed you. It's consuming them. I am done letting it consume me." And T'Challa sheaths his claws, lets go of his anger, and while not letting Nemo go, arrests him as opposed to killing him. Now, the lesson that we focused on in our youth group with this was the forgiveness. That T'Challa forgives Nemo. But the reason he's able to do that is because when he really looks at what Nemo is saying, he sees himself. The same vengeance he sees in Nemo is the same vengeance that T'Challa has been holding on to. He realizes that in looking at his enemy, what he's really seeing is himself. And T'Challa decides that he doesn't want to be that anymore. He doesn't want to be his enemy anymore. Now, in the midst of our readings today, which all seem to be about the end times, all seem to be a little ahead of Advent. You may or may not remember Advent is actually a second coming. It prepares us for Christmas by also preparing us for Jesus' coming again. So we get a little prelude of that today. And in the midst of those readings, we've got 2 Thessalonians. And in that reading, we see the man of lawlessness. As the New Revised Standard Version says, the lawless one. That lawless one is one who would like to exalt himself above God, above any God, really. That puts himself in the place of a false prophet, of a false chosen one. The lawless one is one even who would claim himself to be God. And this lawless one, that's really our enemy, our greatest enemy as a church, our greatest enemy as those who serve God and no one else. Now, there's some manuscripts, and without going into all the boring details, that instead of the man of lawlessness, have the phrase the man of sin. And I say that because that's actually a very helpful way to look at this person. Because sin is basically our separation from God. Really what it is our putting ourselves above God, of our saying, I know better than you do, God. And that's something we've all done in our lives, whether we want to admit it or not. We have all said those words, I know better than you, God. Whether it's out loud or in our hearts, or in my case right now, saying it in a sermon. We've all said those words. We're all guilty of that. We've all tried to put ourselves above God. We've all sinned and fallen short. We've all become our own worst enemy. So how do we prevent that? How do we prevent from either becoming or staying our worst enemy? How do we be like T'Challa and put down our claws, put down our righteous vengeance, our trying to put ourselves in God's place? How do we lay down our arms like T'Challa and no longer be that worst enemy? Well, I'm really glad you guys asked that question. And the answer, I think, really comes in spiritual direction. Now, some of you know I've been training in this with Metagem Institute here in our Diocese of Alabama. What spiritual direction is it's about listening to God. It's often done with a spiritual director, but the spiritual director isn't there to tell you what to do. They're not there to put you on a very specific path. What a spiritual director is there to do is to facilitate your listening to what God has to say to you. The spiritual director facilitates listening to the Holy Spirit. No more, no less. Sometimes that's done with just listening. Sometimes that's done by asking questions. Sometimes that's done by doing a little bit of both. And the reason that I say I think spiritual direction is the answer in order to not become or to not stay being our own worst enemy is because spiritual direction is something that we're not just called to do when we're meeting with our spiritual director. It's not something we're called to do even if we're not seeing a spiritual director right now. It's something we're called to do always. We're called to always listen to what it is God is trying to say to us. We're always called to do that. And it just so happens that a lot of times it does help having someone like a spiritual director, having someone there to help walk that journey with you, to maybe sometimes nudge with those questions. But that's something that can often help us, having someone to help us along the way. It's what we're called to do in baptism, right? To help each other in this spiritual journey that we are all undertaking. Now, one of the ways I think we can best do this, best listen to what it is that God is saying to us, is when whatever action we're doing, whatever life event we may be going through, always stop and ask ourselves, do I see God in this moment? Where is God present for me right now? Sometimes we get busy. Sometimes we get so focused on what we're doing that we don't take the time to ask that question. To ask the question, where is God in all of this? And so when we become frustrated or when we become unsure of ourselves, it is always helpful for us to stop and ask this question. Where is God in this? And if our answer is not sure, then we really need to take a moment. Stop. Stop doing what we're doing. Reflect. And listen. And start to see, where is God actually in all of this? Because when we listen, when we stop and listen, that's how we can always find ourselves coming back to the right path. When we stop and listen. If we want to keep ourselves from becoming that which we hate, stopping and reflecting is always the tool to do that. If we take the time to stop and reflect on our actions, to really listen and see, is God present with us right now? And if not, where is God calling me to be? Then even if we have strayed far off the path, as long as we stop and listen and hear what God has to say, we will always come back. We all at times struggle. And we all at times put ourselves above God. But if we want to keep ourselves from following that path any further, if we want to make it so that we get back on the right path for our journey, what we need to do is stop and listen, to see where God is present for us. And if we don't see God present, to see where God might be for us. And that is the only way which we will prevent ourselves from becoming that man of lawlessness and sin. It's the only way that we can keep ourselves continuing and following in the path that God wishes for us to walk on.